Now, I mean, in our country, and I suppose in many other countries, we have a large amount of the population who are quite poor, and who struggle just with day-by-day living. And in addition to that, obviously we've got TB, we've got high rates of HIV, there's sanitation and water problems. I think at the moment many students are having difficulty with continuing their studies because they don't have access to internet facilities. How, in this kind of context, do we maintain that positivity and focusing on the positive side of the experience? How would we comfort them, or how would we guide them in
certainly that if one is lucky enough to have a large house so they can find ways to get away from the rest of the family and so on, it's easy. But the people who are not blessed in this way, who are living in small cramped quarters, however they managed 6 months ago, they can be managing right now, if they put their stress aside. All right. So stress relies on two things. It relies on an assumption that something is going to happen, and when it happens, it's going to be awful. Now, the first thing is, as we just said, we can't predict what's going to happen next. So if people start generating reasons why this terrible thing might not happen, they'll immediately feel better. Second, and this is hard these days, but still, consequences are in our heads. They're not in the external world, which means that nothing is positive or negative. It just is. And so if they take the things that they think are negative and they ask, well, how might this actually be a good thing? Then things switch around. That's my dogs upstairs. Can you hear them? That means the mailman is there or something. At any rate, so you went from this terrible thing is definitely going to happen to this thing may or may not happen. And if it happens, there'll be positive aspects to it. So, people need to ameliorate. People follow what I call what's called defensive pessimism style. And I think that that's a big mistake. And I'll explain in a moment. People follow what I call what's called defensive pessimism style. And I think that that's a big mistake. And I'll explain in a moment. The expectation that it's not going to, it's sort of, it's not going to happen, but maybe, and what happens is our expectations tend to be fulfilled. Now, people adopt an attitude of defensive pessimism, thinking that if something negative does happen, they will be not caught off guard and better able to handle it. But I think that that's wrong also, that if one is expecting the best and our expectations tend to be confirmed, that makes us stronger. And if things are only good, then what happens is we haven't wasted our time worrying. And if things turn out not to be as we had hoped, we had expected, then we're stronger and better able to deal with it. So this, instead of a defensive pessimism, and I argue for a mindful optimism, where it's sort of like buying house insurance for those in better, more economically sound houses, that you buy a house, and because you could lose the house, you buy house insurance. And then you go about living. You don't spend every day worrying that the house is going to go up in smoke or some disaster is going to strike. So what we want to do to be mindful, to have this attitude of mindful optimism, is to make a plan. And the plan would be things like self-quarantining, washing your hands, keeping social distance, doing some exercise, trying to eat well, and so on. And then you just go about living your life.